I wanted to go through a survey that we do annually. And are you seeing my screen? No?
Yes.
Oh, you are. You're seeing state of state courts? Okay, good.
We're seeing not the present mode, just the slide deck.
Okay, slide. Oh, okay. That was darn. Okay, sorry. Technology is getting the better of me. I tried to move it to a different monitor, and wouldn't you know it doesn't like it. So I know I'm not going to put it in slideshow mode. So you'll be able to get a little preview if you can read that fine print. Hopefully it's large enough. If not, let me know and we can work on making it bigger. But we do this annual survey at NCSC to just see how courts are doing, and we typically cover different topics. One year we actually, I want to say 2 years ago, we covered ODR. This year it had to do with juries and jury service, but we ask a lot of the same questions. And part of that is, if you do surveys, you like to have that baseline to be able to track trends and all of that. So let's go ahead and go through this. And actually, I am going to put this into slide mode. So you're seeing that what we do is we always ask the question, how much confidence do you have in your local police department? And emphasis on local. When people take a national view, these change, but when we talk about your local congressman, your local police department, all of that, you can see that there's been a little bit of a shift, from 2018 when it was the highest, but it's not as a significant drop as you would expect based on some of the headlines that are going around.
You might want to try changing your display. So there's a swap display button. We're seeing 2 slides.
Okay, there we go. Well, I told you I was going to.
That's the way we like it.
All right, so there you go. So then in 2015, we actually focused in on minorities in our surveys, and you can see here that only 32% of African Americans believe that state courts provide equal justice to all. And that has stayed fairly consistent across the board. So we have some work to do. Here's a quote from a man who said, as I said before, they stopped me for no reason. You don't have to be a criminal to be treated like one. And I think that this is very relevant for what's going on today. Then the next one that I want to display is that, the confidence is tracking pretty steady as far as state court. So in 2020, it was 70%. 2018 was a high of 76. But, people are fairly confident in the court system. And the 8-year average is 70%. There's some pandemic related obstacles. I will say, I don't know why this slide is in here, because I went through and I thought I had taken some of these out, so I'm going to just go ahead. But here's a slide that I think is interesting, because people always say, well, that national survey is nice, but my state is different. So here we go. We ran the same survey in Texas as we did nationally. As my friend David Slayton says, we are extremely red. So you would expect that if there was going to be a difference, that everything's bigger in Texas, right? So national, percent, Texas 69%. Eating at a restaurant, how many would during the pandemic would feel comfortable eating out at a restaurant? Texas, 0.1 off. How many believe masks should be required in courts? 67%. Texas, 68%. So you can see that that the survey that we do is pretty pretty consistent with locals. So now here's what I wanted to get to, because remote court services includes ODR. And so in 2014, we asked, how many people would want to appear via video conference for their own case. 2014, we see the numbers. Less than half would use it, and technology terms, 6 years is a very, very long time. You're seeing, a dramatic shift here. Just one other slide here on the survey. People are always concerned about the digital divide. We are too. We will talk a little bit more about this, but 85% of people have internet at home. 95% have a cell phone, with 85% of those having a smartphone. And it's 2.44% who have no home internet, no cell phone. And so the numbers on the digital divide are not as dramatic as, one person was telling me, well, 30% of the people can't access technology. Well, that's just not true. So then I'm not going to go into the jury service. I think that I've made my point in terms of what people want in terms of technology, what they're comfortable with, and so forth. So now we'll go to and then I did want to mention a survey that was done, and it's not a survey, sorry, it's a study. Some of you may have seen this. I hope that you have. If I can find it on my desktop, I'll show you, but otherwise I will not. Here we go. So this is a study that was done of virtual hearings. And I think that this is important for ODR because it does speak to some issues that can be out there for ODR. One is technology adoption. So you look at the people who are going through virtual hearings, and it's amazing to see certain things. So one of the things that we've learned through virtual jury service is that people who have served on juries physically and then who have done virtual juries say they love the virtual experience more. And one of the reasons given is that they are looking directly at the judge, they're looking directly at the witnesses, they're looking directly at the prosecutors. So they no longer have that side view in the courthouse that, they say, well, we felt a bit disconnected, that we weren't really part of it. And so judges and the attorneys are finding that jurors are more engaged. Maybe part of it is because they're on Zoom and, they're right there in front, but the jurors themselves are pointing that out. The other thing that came out of this study was just how much people like the technology. There was one person who said they felt that they would have had a different experience in court, but out of the 305, that's a pretty low percentage rate. Another thing that was interesting to me in this study was that judges who were engaged in the technology had a much better experience in terms of the participants had a much better experience. There was one judge who had all of their staff running the show and was just I won't say dismissive of the technology, but just not engaged with the technology. And the people who came into that court experience felt like they had a lesser experience than they could have. So, having judges, having attorneys, having staff engaged in the process is critical to its success. So that's that. So any questions or comments up to this point? Okay. Everybody's on mute. Okay. So let's do another presentation. So I have to say that, oh man, which one? Like I said, I'm managing a few too many. Okay, so hopefully you're seeing a screen that says ODR is here to stay, get over it. Okay, I'm seeing nodding heads on a different panel, of course. I think most of you have seen this iceberg before, but I think it's important for us to just do a refresher that, what courts and lawyers see is around 20%, some say even less, of the actual justice issues that people have, whether that's issues with a landlord-tenant or whether that's issues with healthcare or whatever. We're just seeing a small portion of that. I don't need to go through the Bangalore Principles. I believe most of you are familiar with them, but that we need to make sure that whatever we do, including ODR, lines up with those Bangalore Principles. Access to the internet is now deemed a human right. And so it fits right in with ODR. I wanted to go through just a few things here. So this is borrowed from my good friend, Justice Simonis in the Utah Supreme Court, but he says the justice system is broken, and he says, okay, yeah, maybe it's a bit hyperbolic, but there is a significant issue in our access to justice gap. And unfortunately, it's not closing, it is expanding. He is the first to say, if he had, if he was king for a day, everybody would get a lawyer and then we wouldn't need other alternatives. But that just can't happen, and especially when you consider that we're only seeing 20% of the legal issues, then it becomes so dramatic. And so he says we need to have things like ODR for that delivery of legal things. Many of you have seen this quote. I love it. Poor people have access to the American courts in the same sense that the Christians had access to the lions when they were dragged into a Roma arena. And that's, from a retired Justice Johnson. A couple other quotes I want to share with you. My friend Tom Clark, who moved out to Utah before I did, and I follow him around. He says, ironically, the pandemic has done more to advance technology in the courts than 10 years of work at NCSC. And I think that that's very true. And when we get into some of the case studies, you'll see that that's the case. And then another, most courts are learning months worth of lessons in days. They are learning new skills because they had to. Once you have to, you keep the parts that are helpful. This is not the disruption we wanted, but it is the disruption we needed. And that's from Chief Justice Bridget McCormick in Michigan. And we're going to talk a little bit about them in one of our case studies. And then from our good friend Richard Susskind, this was, when I was feeling proud of the courts for moving to Zoom and, and doing virtual hearings, he says, almost all the remote courts that have been set up in response to the virus are variations on the theme of traditional courts. We should be clear, dropping our current court system into Zoom is not a shift in paradigm. And I thought, you know what? I hate to say it, Richard, but you're right. We need to be able to have some more dramatic shifts if we can. So 59% of voters agree that courts are not doing enough to empower regular people without legal help. That's from another one of our surveys at NCSC. So let me pause there and see what's going on. Where is my, any questions, any thing people are asking? Chat. Okay. All right. So any questions? Keep going. Okay. So just some new delivery channels that are emerging. ODR is one of them, but we have the reworking legal regulation. We have the allowing non-lawyers, and then investing in technology. And so we have convergence that's happening with people trying new things in the access to justice space that will affect it. ODR is well positioned to help in this. And then here's a famous quote from The Future is Technology. Bit extreme, life without technology is meaningless. Well, okay, I don't know. It depends on how broad you want to make technology, but yeah. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the Utah usability study that they did. I thought it was excellent, and I'm stopping the share so that I can share another screen, hopefully, and not making you people seasick. Let's see. Where is it? Not that one. Well, this will be embarrassing if I closed it down. I do have to say that I was reviewing my slides 15 minutes before my session, and of course I found that I had lost several of my slides. So okay, well, I'm not seeing it, so we're not going to do that. But let me go back to sharing this. But the Utah usability study was really excellent. I believe it was the first time that a court actually did a usability study on their systems, but there were several key takeaways from that usability study. One had to do with registration, making the registration easy. Another had to do with people get confused with URLs that have percent signs in them and all of that, and so making URLs. Another that I think is really, really important in terms of ODR is that making sure that people have easy access to I don't want to call it legal advice, but to legal resources where they can go off and they can say, okay, what does this this statute or this rule actually mean? And don't make them do a Google search for it and try to wade through, have that right there. If you're going to present things, make sure that they can access it there, either within the app or at least the app links out to those kinds of resources. That fits right into the legal portal work that we're doing at NCSC. We believe that ODR and legal portals should go hand in hand so that people can go through that discovery experience on their own. Start out with ODR, but also be able to educate themselves along the way through something like a legal portal. we can certainly make these URLs available if people have not seen this. Hopefully they have. Let's see. Okay, any questions to that point? You guys are an easy crowd, or difficult. Okay.
I have a few questions. This is Heather Lester.
Yeah, Heather.
So the study that you were talking about, that you were referencing in the first part before that last user study, when was that done? Was that pre-pandemic or post, or during? I just didn't know if that kind of mixed in for the time frame.
Oh, excellent question. So it was done actually about, I want to say, a month ago.
Nice.
And it was specific to virtual hearings.
Okay.
So so that is really nice, because then we have kind of that, oh, okay, so this is what people are experiencing in virtual hearings in the new norm, or whatever, or what may be the new norm.
Yeah, I just asked, I'm in the same demographic as you are. I'm actually in Utah, and I did a lot of court mediation, housing specific landlord tenant mediator stuff before, like pre-pandemic, and as we know, it's not the same. And especially going in now twice a week with debt collection and occupancy hearing stuff, seeing how it's virtually done, with some of the judges and some of the pro bono people and the legal services folks for access to justice. It's been really good. And a lot of the stuff you're coming through with the stuff on your survey really acclimates to how it is on the ground being done. So it's kind of nice to see it in a study somewhere. So I just wanted to tune in there.
Yeah. Yeah, so you can reach out to me, or I don't know, Noam, if there's a place for us to post the resources. I guess there probably is. So we'll make sure that we have links to that.
Perfect. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah, just send them over, Paul, and we can put them on the main page so people can get access to them.
Absolutely. I can do that. Okay. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I want to spend probably a little bit more time on Utah than some of the other ones, because Utah did the right thing. They started collecting stats and metrics at the very beginning, because they had some good advice from some people. So interesting. This was not at all one of the reasons why they implemented ODR. But what they found was an unexpected benefit, and that was pre-ODR, they were taking 9 minutes of staff time per case. Post-ODR, that cut almost in half. So like I said, this was not something that they went in saying, oh, we've got to become more efficient. It just happened. And interestingly enough, the judge in the first pilot site said that his staff came to him, every single one of them came to him and said, no matter how this pilot ends up, we are not going back, because it's just so much easier for them to deal with the cases. So that's the 45% reduction. Fewer hearings. So the number of hearings per case is down. It's been very interesting, I think. Oh, sorry. So I actually have had the opportunity to go and observe court before the pandemic. And it used to be that the judge would have around 100 cases that they would do in a court hearing, and about 80 of those would just be default judgments. Since they implemented ODR, they have the same amount of time allotted for the hearings, but they have anywhere from 3 to about 8 hearings that are happening in that time frame. And so the judges are spending a lot more time. One of the interesting things is, because these people have gone through ODR, they actually have been communicating with one another. So the communication
for those hours for the specialty crop grants, I'm gonna create a line in my timesheet. I know I'm the only one using those, and then I can just copy that and put it into whatever.
Noam, I think it's up to you to mute.
Do you want me to do a Google
Yeah.
sheet or do you want Michelle to do it?
Okay.
All right, Paul.
Yeah, I know how to do that. Okay.
Great. Okay, sounds good.
Yeah, yeah. But the communication between parties is significantly better, and they're coming to court better prepared because they've been able to spend a couple weeks working on what is the real issue here. And so when they come to court, they actually can get to the substance of the dispute. In one instance, there was a dispute where the judge, everybody there in the gallery was going, okay, judge, it's obvious what the answer is here, but the judge was just spending all kinds of time with them, just to make sure that they had their day in court and that they were heard, even though it was very obvious what the resolution was going to be. This is just now, these stats are old, I will say. These are probably 5 months old, 4 months old. This is, what they are seeing in terms of their stats. So 44% reduction in number of hearings, prompt to resolution. So you can see pre-ODR, it was 93 days. Now they're doing 63 days. They've actually heard from some people that are saying, whoa, my hearing is coming up too fast. Can you move it back? And that's something that courts love to hear because they usually don't hear that. And then let's see, prompt to resolution. So you can see how quickly, or here's the opt-out. I love this. So out of 2,000 cases, we have 28 that have opted out. And a few of those, the judge told the person that they were opting out because they just couldn't get through the technology. But most of these are around language, some are around access, but actually not too many are around access. So here's a roadmap. We'll post these, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, but establishing a small working group, involving people, so on and so forth. Justice Simonis loves to talk about his wild animal group, also known as Skunk Works. But that's one thing that Utah did, was they created a small group and they reimagined what the process would look like, and then put ODR on top of it. Obviously, they had to adhere to statutes and rules, but some of the rules changed as a result. And build a minimal viable product. I mean, that is so critical. All too often we try to build this wonderful space shuttle when what we need is, we just need a skateboard that will get us a couple blocks down the road. And then pilot the program and pilot. Here are some screens. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on these, but I did want to point out that when somebody comes in here, there aren't a whole lot of legal terms here. They have made this so that it's approachable by the average citizen who, this is the language that they speak. I don't owe this claim, or I don't agree with it, and so on and so forth. You can see, let's see, here we go. So if you say, I want options to pay this claim, here they are. You can say, I disagree, I owe some of it. And so then you can see this kind of goes into a chat where you see the blue is, the defendant, the red is, the person who brought the suit. And then you can see how a facilitator jumps in and says, I'm a neutral. You have the color coding and so forth. And then you can do an agreement, and you can upload that. That was another thing in the usability study, was make it easier to upload documents. So So I went through, I spent a little bit of time on Utah, but I do want to go into some other jurisdictions. Any questions up to this point? Okay. Looks like we have some chat going, but I'm not going to take the time to read it. Noam said he would read it for me and let me know if I needed to address anything. Okay, so New Jersey. New Jersey is an interesting one. If you ever want to know the power of the International ODR Forum, thank you, Colin and others. But New Jersey, last October, it's amazing. I guess it's a year ago, last October, since we're in November. But they went to the ODR forum and they said, "Hey, this is a good idea. Let's start investigating this and all that." Well, so they were playing around with it, investigating it a little bit, playing around just kind of with the technology. New Jersey is a build your own shop in the courts. And so they were doing this among other things. Well, the pandemic hit in March. By the end of March, they said, we don't know how long this is going to happen. So let's take that ODR and let's get it done. By the first part of May, they had an ODR solution rolled out in pilot, and now they've rolled it out statewide for their traffic hearings. And they have 15,000 traffic cases a month. So you can see that, I believe that they were at 40% last time I heard, but they were inching their way up. So 40% of 15,000, I mean, that's a huge number of cases being heard through ODR, and a big win for the community as well as for New Jersey. So I thought that was a great highlight. Connecticut. Connecticut did their own traffic system. They're another build your own shop. This is interesting. I didn't realize I was featuring all the build your own shops, Utah, New Jersey, Connecticut, but Connecticut built their own. There's this traffic, but I don't want to get too down into the weeds, but Connecticut took their traffic module and expanded that to commercial driver's license hearings. Now, where that's important is that even though commercial CDL or commercial driver license hearings are a pretty small subset, they actually require some specialized knowledge about it. And so when typical judges or judges who aren't steeped in CDL do these hearings, they do what's called masking, where they will ultimately let somebody drive who shouldn't be driving because they have a CDL. And that's where you get the headlines of the tanker ran into the family and killed, 5 people or whatever. Well, Connecticut now is able to, because they have ODR and a CDL module, they have these specialized prosecutors, specialized judges who are able to do all of these hearings, and they no longer have to try to educate all the judges across the state. And so this is of huge interest to the Department of Transportation, but also to the court community. So another great success for ODR. And then Michigan, you may have heard that Michigan is the first one to roll out a statewide ODR solution, or at least that's what they claim. But what's interesting is Michigan, were some of the first courts to adopt ODR. They started out with traffic. They went into some of the child support enforcement, but now they're getting into family. All their mediation centers are using it. So they've expanded it quite a bit. Chief Justice Bridget McCormick is one of the ones that I quoted. she is leading the charge and saying we have got to put ODR out more and more throughout our state and make access to justice. Um, I wanted to talk a little bit about case types. So far, we have strong representation in both civil and traffic, but ones that are coming up that are gaining traction are in the family area. So a lot of has been done on post-decree kinds of things, but there's even more stuff now being done on, the divorce and even with contested divorces. So we're seeing more there. One of the things, and Heather mentioned this in her question, but one of the things that we are very, very concerned with that we know is going to happen is all these evictions will start happening, and it's going to be a pretty significant load on courts. That as well as the credit card debt or bad debt. So we know that there are going to be tsunamis in both of those case types. And so we have Iowa and Tennessee. Iowa is looking at landlord-tenant cases, moving those to ODR. Tennessee is looking at moving medical debt issues to ODR. And so I think we'll see more and more of those case types expanding, especially as courts try to figure out how can we handle this huge load that is going to be coming our way. And so I think that's interesting. We also see a few reaching out and branching out into the criminal. Most of these are misdemeanor kinds of things, but the lower level giving the prosecutors the ability to do this online instead of outside the court room doors, like they typically do those last minute pleas. Well, let's go ahead and move that to online. Okay, any questions up to that point?
This is great, Paul. This is really, really valuable to get your bird's eye view on all of this. Thank you.
Okay, Rachel, you have a question?
I do. Hi, my name is Rachel Ellis. I'm a student at UMass Amherst. And I was just wondering, and I guess you're actually going to talk about it right now, but kind of talking about the cases that, have been proven successful with ODR. Are there any, certain types of law that you see posing great challenges? And I guess that is what you are likely going into next.
Well, actually, so Rachel, I wasn't going to talk so much that, but I think that's an excellent question. I mean, there are the obvious ones, and where we usually draw the line is anytime somebody's liberty is going to be at stake. So if you're going to jail somebody, right now we don't think that ODR is the best place to hear those kinds of cases. If there's any kind of constitutional issues or challenges of that nature, we don't see that. I mean, I guess it could be, but not really. And then the other one is a little bit trickier, but that is imbalance of power. Now you could say, well, if I have a credit card company and a poor worker here, that's an imbalance of power. Well, actually, I believe that ODR kind of levels that playing field because you can monitor that, the conversations through facilitators, through mediators, and you can really ensure that that imbalance of power doesn't come into play in those cases that are being held online. So hopefully that helped a bit, but I know those are broad categories instead of me talking about where the felony class 1 or whatever.
Paul,
Yeah.
you showed us, this is Bill Waters in Detroit. You showed us the iceberg of what 70% of people's problems are not making it to the courts. Has the ODR affected the iceberg at all? Are we seeing previously unseen types of cases, or what do you think?
So we are seeing people who would have normally had a default judgment. They are actually now participating. Now, unfortunately, it's not, oh, wow, we saw this dramatic jump, but we've seen about 20% more or 20% fewer defaults because those people are getting engaged. One of the things that that brings up is that, and we're trying to figure out how do we measure this, but if somebody starts the ODR process, but then gets, 3 or 4 different, is involved in a discussion and then just leaves, is that a success for ODR, because they left because, okay, they recognize they're not going to get a deal or they're, it's not going to be what they thought it was, or is that a failure? And that's something that we are trying to measure, but we haven't found a good way of measuring yet without going to the actual people and saying, yeah, we were stalking you online and saw that you left and want to know why, kind of thing. So.
Well, a couple of comments that have been made in the chat, and maybe, as Rachel said, maybe they're what you're headed for. One from Chuck Crampton, who's saying that, or maybe I'm reading into the comment that all of this would seem to indicate that it's not only the technology resources that need to be developed, but it's the human and legal systems aspects of the court that really need to be developed and brought into alignment. This isn't just kind of tweaking putting some of the hearings online or whatever it is and tweaking things, but this is essentially a new court structure, and all of the organizational charts might need to be redrawn. And if you're going to, and a second comment that is from a different direction is Heather Lester commenting that part of the issues it's not an issue necessarily of participation, people being willing to participate in ODR events or being successful in participating in ODR hearings. It's really a lot of the challenges on the very front end of notification. So 2 comments from different directions.
So notification is always interesting. And some people, some courts have actually played around with like Facebook notification. And nobody's done Instagram or WhatsApp or whatever, but at least that I know of. But I think that notification really does need to be explored and pursued because because somebody gets a notification in the mail and chooses not to participate, would they be more likely if they got notified via social media or notified, via text or something like that? Would they participate more? And that's something that I think is worth looking at. The other problem that we have is that courts don't advertise. And, in some ways that's not our job, but on the other hand, should we be allowing that 80% to go, that 80% legal need, should we allow that to go unmet, or should we be actually saying, hey, you do have options? And I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. We have lawyers who are out there advertising. Should courts be saying, hey, we can help you with your issue, and I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I did want to cover some challenges real quick. So you're probably very familiar that we have centralized and decentralized courts. You have courts in Texas, Michigan, Florida, where each county does their own thing, and they buy their own technology. They implement their own technology. Sometimes they even implement their own rules. Ohio is probably one of the worst in terms of, each judge has the ability to do that. You have a judge in Ohio. I mean, he's a great friend of mine, but I mean, he has Watson in his courtroom, and and normally you would think, oh, let's use Watson across an entire state. Well, he's just using it for his own specific court. So it's interesting. Digital divide. So we have some perceptions and some realities here. You know, there's always this perception that, oh, there's this huge swath that doesn't have access. And sometimes we're looking at the wrong swath, I believe, where we're focusing in on people who maybe don't have technology. I think one of the challenges we have is how do we bring along people who don't want to adopt technology? That's an interesting one. And then how do we ensure that we're always have these alternate paths? I'm a strong believer that ODR should be an opt-out, that it should be the court process, but I also believe that there should be many doors available to people to be able to come to a court and have their issues heard and hopefully resolved. We have procedural constraints. I had to laugh. One jurisdiction put ODR into play, but they said, well, yeah, if somebody wants to participate in ODR, they have to appear before the judge and they have to request it, and then they can, participate in ODR. And I thought, well, wait a minute, if they're coming down to the court already, why would they want to do that? So we have too many people who are taking ODR, putting it on top of existing processes that are bad. So we really need to do re-engineering. There's a lot of, I don't know where to begin out there, despite all the great education that all of you have done and many others. So I think that's just part of the culture, of, I don't, what they're really saying is, I don't know how to change what we do. And then one of the things that we're seeing since the pandemic is this, I just want to go back to the way things were. And there is a very, very big concern about this backslide that could potentially happen. So those are some of the challenges that I wanted to highlight. Any questions before I wrap up?
Hi, Paul. This is Nick. Thank you for doing this. Have you seen any patterns or examples around the re-engineering that multiple courts have been successful with?
Yeah, so quite often it is getting a small group together and especially ensuring that there is public engagement, and public can take anything, form from anything from having victims advocates in the room to some people even actually reach out and say, hey, would you be willing to participate in this particular thing for a couple of hours, and getting the public to engage. But so small groups, and then definitely making sure that it's not just court personnel, because you'll end up building an ODR solution for court personnel, not for the people who are outside the courts who are using it. Other questions? Okay. I just wanted to cover a couple of critical success factors. I know not everybody will agree with this. It used to be that I would say, oh, you've got to get your stakeholders on board. You've really got to, do that. And the more and more I've worked in ODR, what has mattered the most is the project champion, whether that's a chief justice, whether that's a justice, whether that's a judge, whether that's just a research person. I mean, I have seen them at all levels, but these project champions are tireless. They know how to navigate. They do bring in the right people. They bring in stakeholders, but I have seen way too many efforts where they bring in stakeholders, but then, there's no real project champion, and they get a solution out there, but it doesn't really get used. And and it's just not the same. And so project champions are key to being successful, especially with ODR, because it is a culture change. Another one is the opt-in versus opt-out. Opt-out or opt-in works great for traffic. I've not seen it work well in other case types. It's just I've seen them be marginally successful, but they do not have the numbers, and then people sit around a year later and say, well, is this really worth us continuing, based on all the resources that we've put in? And so that is a big factor. And with that, I think I am done, unless people have questions or comment.
That was great, Paul. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Questions, comments, reactions, thoughts?
Yeah, I do have a question. Hi, I'm Stella Plekin. I was just kind of wondering, so your overall opinion is that this helps a lot more with access to justice for the people, and it does not really have a negative effect on access to justice, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so far I have not seen a negative side to ODR. Now that doesn't mean that there won't be. I can imagine plenty of scenarios where it could be an issue, but so far ODR has increased access to justice, and it's just really not been an issue that I've seen.
Yeah.
Paul, when you hear skepticism from the judiciary, from judges, what kind of skepticism are you still hearing? I mean, obviously the pandemic knocked down a lot of the barriers, and some of the criticisms, I'm sure, they criticize lots of things, but is there one criticism you've heard that you think gets to the heart of it and it's something we need to take very seriously?
The criticisms that are really, they seem to boil down to culture, how, I mean, it almost always comes in the form of, well, people won't know their legal rights, or they can't, I've also heard, well, they can't represent themselves, and, there may be some truth in that, but, and this is always the struggle with access to justice. If I have to wait 2 years for an outcome, do I really have access to justice? And if I, as a smart individual, and I'm not saying I'm smart, I should be pointing at Colin, but if Colin, as a smart individual, says, I'm willing to give up some due process for, to trade for such and so, should we be allowing that? I don't know. I think there's some questions that ODR is raising that really need to be addressed and answered by people not like me. I'm a technologist. Give me a problem, I'll solve it. But I think some people really need to sit down and say, what is justice nowadays in a new world? It isn't the justice that you got in 1600s. It's not the justice you got in, the 1800s.
I have a question, Paul, about the idea of the role of the public. And I know that mediation has been revered because it has a privacy feature, and public courts have been revered because people can show up and see a case in action, and if they're angry at someone, they can see justice at work. Where is the public in ODR in the courts right now?
So right now, most of the implementations of ODR, I would actually call them electronic ADR. And so they are following a lot of the same principles, where it's private, it's mediated, and so on and so forth. I think that probably that next frontier is actually what you're talking about, Bill, where, it could happen. It could happen in a public way. Where people could see that. Now, there's a lot of cringing on that because, I think people like ODR because it's like chat, it's like Instagram, it's like those kinds of things that they're familiar with. But if I'm going to come in and start listening in on Bill's Instagram feed, you may have an issue with that.
Yep.
Paul, if I can put you on the spot, what do you think you'll be talking about at Cyberweek 2021?
Well, so I know of at least 10 other states that will have implemented ODR by then. So that's great news. I hope what we're talking about is some of the innovations, the cross-section of ODR and AI. I think there's a lot of potential there. I think we can start talking about what is that next level of ODR going to look like. So I don't know. I hope we talk about some of those things. We'll see.
Thanks.
Did you say 10 more states that are going to be implementing it, or 10 more courts?
States.
I heard state.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's amazing. Okay,
Yeah.
great. Incredible.
Yeah, there are RFPs out there. Some exist, and then some are being developed. But yeah, you'll see some great stuff.
It's a date. Any other questions, folks? Comments? Okay then. Yeah.
I would say, please don't hesitate to reach out. It's always, I love talking about ODR, and hopefully I've done something to stimulate you.
Well, on that, let me jump in. I dropped off before I could give my introduction to Paul, but the one tiny piece of that introduction that I will share here is that I think that everyone who's been involved in the field for a while now can recognize the degree of vitality and excitement and activity and stimulation, to use your word, that Paul has brought to this crowd and group and area since he joined a few years ago. And I'm so happy that you gave this talk, Paul. I'm thrilled that you've already booked your spot for next year. And Paul is also, as he indicated, a very, very accessible person. So feel free to reach out to him. And with that, I'd like to just give a couple of pointers of places where we can continue the conversations. We have several discussion forums going on. You can enter them through the agenda, the Cyberweek agenda, or through the homepage on odr.info. And come in, speak your mind, ask questions, or answer them. And they'll be going on all week. Later on this afternoon, we have Amy and Chitu. When are they on? In about 3 hours, discussing the CREC platform, ODR in India, and beyond, other ODR issues more widely. And I hope you'll join in there. I'll also mention that tomorrow evening US time, we have a social gathering, a social hour, and I hope many of you, sure, you came to learn and you came to hear more, and I hope that you're receiving that kind of cognitive stimulation that you came for, but a lot of really nice people involved in ODR, and I hope that you'll come and hang out with them. Not going to speak for myself. I hope you'll come and hang out and learn who these people are, and just join the group. And that will be on Thursday evening US time. It's on the agenda as well. And now, with no further comments, I'm going to wish you all well. Take care, everybody. Thank you for coming.